Collins, and you're watching Talk TV, the home of straight talking. What makes me angry? People who own reptiles make me angry. Why would you own a snake when you live on the 14th floor of a flat in Maidstone? I mean, that's just ridiculous. On a more serious level, what makes me angry? The middle-class intelligentsia, the kind of Guardianista characters that purport to walk in the shoes of ordinary people that actually haven't got a clue what it's really like.
Hello, I'm Zora Suleiman. Former Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein is facing 2 counts of indecent assault against a woman in London back in 1996. The Metropolitan Police were authorised to charge him after reviewing evidence. The alleged victim is a woman who's now in her 50s. A former Love Island contestant has told The Sun that her life spiralled out of control after she was portrayed as an aggressive monster on the show. Bethany Rogers appeared on the first ever season of the show at the age of 19. She's opened up about her addiction to ketamine after she struggled to cope with trolls. And the Foo Fighters have announced a tribute concert at Wembley Stadium in memory of their drummer Taylor Hawkins. It'll be their first performance since the 50-year-old was found dead in his hotel room in Colombia back in March. Well, that's your entertainment news on Talk TV.
TV weather.
Hello, I'm Nazanin Gaffer. We are going to see some wet weather across western areas over the next 24 hours, but further east looks mostly fine and dry. Tonight, we continue with the mostly dry conditions, clear spells as well across England and Wales, a bit cloudy across the north of the UK, and a little bit of rain starting to approach parts of the southwest by dawn. And that's the rain that will be heading across many western parts of the UK through tomorrow, so becoming gradually cloudier and wetter, with mostly patchy light rain across western parts of the UK tomorrow, but the east mostly dry and bright and warm, especially in the southeast.
Times Business sponsors Talk TV weather.
I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is the home of straight talking. What really makes me angry is injustice, when people don't get their fair shot at life, and some people get more than others just because they are there.
And a very good morning to you. 2 minutes past 5. It's Thursday, the 9th of June, and this is Early Breakfast on Talk TV. Live from the Talk Radio studios with me, James Max. We're live from London. So, coming up this morning after 6, going to be joined by Tim Jatisky. He's Director of Reputation at the PHA Group. We'll be reviewing the papers, also looking through the front pages. Later this hour, as the Prime Minister extends the right to buy scheme, what will this do to the housing market? We'll be speaking to Charlie Bannon about that. Also, we sort out your personal finances with Dr. Roger Givolb, including anger over petrol prices, good news from America, and he's frothing at the mouth again. We'll find out why. Also, we'll be speaking to Myron Jobson. He's got the business news. We'll be looking at HMRC's latest stats. We'll be also looking at buy now, pay later research and the Halifax House Price Index. And this morning, well, they acted on energy costs, but the government are tinkering around the edges when it comes to the cost of petrol. There is despair and fury as prices continue to rise. It now costs over £100 just to fill the average family car with fuel. How have you changed the way you use your car? So I want to hear from you on this, because arguably this is the most important political issue. This is the most important social issue. This is the most important issue facing the country. Look, there is plenty of other things, and I'm well aware that there are still distractions over the Prime Minister, his performance, whether or not he should be Prime Minister, whether or not he should step down, whether the opposition have any kind of policies at all. All of this stuff and all of the noise, and that's all very well, but arguably, after energy costs, which at least the government made some action and took some action, but now we've got energy prices in another shape or form, and they're not taking action. We had all the hullabaloo when the Chancellor said, oh, I'm taking 5p off there. It's like, not enough. Where's the 20, 30, 40p off a litre? When are you going to do that, Rishi Sunak? I don't mean that you need to do it forever. I don't mean that you need to do it. But when you have a situation that you have not managed the railways effectively, we are facing, in effect, a week of strikes. People are going to have to use their cars more. Alternatively, working from home comes back. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to couch it, this is the most significant problem, because the other thing is that with fuel prices rising and without government necessarily taking action, hang on a second, that means that every single thing you buy will be going up in price. That means that the inflation escalator that we continue to worry about, this impact upon the economy and your pocket, our pockets, continues. And it's something where the government could act. And I don't want them to take away the petrol and to stop, you know, if, for example, they want to wean us off petrol cars and diesel cars, that's all very well. But we can get back to that when markets normalise. Markets are not normal at the moment. And that, when markets are not normal, I expect action to be taken. I mean, how is it that Malta manages to charge just over £1 a litre? Why? Because there's less tax. We know that we have fuel tax. We know that we have VAT. We know that we have a whole range of other things. Suspend the VAT on fuel, or do something about car duty, or do something. Not 5p. And by the way, take pictures and have pricing relating to your pricing now. So you come in and you say, right, OK, what's your average price been over the last whatever days? You have to demonstrate, as a petrol retailer, that you have reduced your price by the amount of the tax decrease. And if you don't, you'll be fined. And let's have a look at the profits from the petrol retailers and what they're doing. OK. I want you to get involved, though, in this conversation, because I want you to tell me whether or not you are facing some kind of dilemma, whether you are... I mean, I know we talked about rising costs in general. I know we talked about energy costs and talking heating homes and lighting home and all that stuff. But petrol is one of those things that, depending on where you live, it's really important. Now, if you live in a central urban location, it's probably not as important, because you use your car, if you've got one, for shorter journeys, you fill up less with petrol. But on the other hand, if you use your car or your van for work, if you live in a rural area and there is no public transport alternative, you will use your car a lot. And maybe you're a little bit smug because you're thinking, yeah, everybody said don't get an electric car. The one thing I'm upset about is, well, you know, just trying to work your way through that. You know, sometimes you think, OK, yeah, I've been really clever with a decision that you've taken about how you run your life, and then something comes along and bites you on the rear end. There was me thinking, oh, yeah, I'll be really clever. I don't want to go on any flights because they're really expensive and planes have gone up and the price of holidays. I'll use a car, go on a driving holiday because that will be cheaper. No. No. That's the budget blown. So, do give me a call and have your say, because there's despair, there's fury, prices continue to rise. We saw 2p rise yesterday at many forecourts across the nation. Have you seen the price rise? Have you changed the way you use your car because of the cost of filling? Right, here's the telephone numbers, 0344 499 1000. Tell me how you live your life. Tell me how it's affected you, because I mean, my budget for this little holiday, which, I don't know, we'll do, 1,000 miles as we trek across the country and back again. You know, it's something that normally you'd use 2 tanks of fuel, and you know, it's a lump sum, and it's just like, yeah, OK, fine. And it's not a worry. Now, it's 2 or 3 tanks of fuel. It's just like, hang on a second, that's twice the budget. That's twice as much as I thought it was going to cost. 0344 499 1000. You can tweet at Talk TV or at the James Max. You can send a text 87222. Start your text with the word talk, and cost 25p plus your standard network rate. Do give me a call though. Tell me how you use your car how you've changed the way you use your car, and also, do you want some action from the government? Do you want the government to take some action to help you? Because I want to hear about you if you use a car or a van for your business. I want to hear if you've stopped using your car for certain things because it's just become too expensive. And how are you coping with this? Because the prices for other things have gone up. Look, if the price of your spaghetti, your pasta goes up by 10%, it's annoying. But we're talking about something that cost £1 is now £1.10. Something that cost £2 is £2.20. You know? It's smallish amounts of money. It might frustrate you, but it's something that you can probably take a decision about, and it's quite easy to manoeuvre around. If the tank of fuel that you have bought used to cost you £50, £55, £60, and it's now costing you £100, £105, £110, and you're doing that once a week, where is that extra £50, £60, £70 coming from? Or are you trying to move to a situation where you fill up once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks? And if so, have you changed the way you use your car? Have you changed what you'll use your car for? 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. You can tweet at Talk TV and at the James Max. OK, I said we go to your calls. Let's do it. Alan is in Middlesbrough. Alan, good morning.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Alan.
I want to say about Boris to begin with. Everyone's on his back about not getting the support of the Tory MPs. When he was elected, he only got the support of 50% of the Tory MPs. There was 3 of them in the vote, and only 50% voted for Boris.
So
they've never liked him. The Tory MPs just
some people don't like him. That's very true. I mean, I would say though that the Prime Minister has been so distracted by all this Partygate and the subsequent noise that this fuel situation is so significant that we need to make sure that the government take action, and it really surprises me that they haven't, and they're not doing something urgently.
It does me. 50% of the cost of the litre of fuel is tax.
Yeah.
So therefore, as it's gone up from £1.50 to £2 a litre, the government are now raking in an extra 25 pence a litre.
Well, of course they are. And I mean,
just give us that back.
Well, the thing is that, well, it's not quite that simple. Well, I suppose because they've got, I mean, they've got the extra VAT. So the VAT is 20% on the fuel. They've got their sort of fixed amount of fuel price, which I think is 50 or 60p a litre as well. So by the time you've added all of that together, they are taking 50 or 60% of the cost of a litre of petrol is tax. So my view would be, and it sounds like you're on the same page, Alan, which is do something now. Take away some of that tax immediately, temporarily, until the price of petrol and fuel normalises. Yes,
yeah, definitely. I have another one for you, James.
Yes?
Global warming.
Yes.
The Americans seem as if they always have more information than we have. Well, when Obama left office, he bought a house on the beach for $12 million. And Nancy Pelosi has just bought one for $25 million on the beach. They don't seem to be worried too much about global warming.
Well, I wouldn't... Well, I think it's climate change that they're concerned about, and I think, look, the climate is changing, whether or not it's exacerbated by human existence, and whether the things that we're being asked to do. I mean, what I would say, Alan, is setting aside any views that you may have about that, because I would challenge them too, and I would ask the questions as to, OK, can we look at the science? But also I would look at the measures that they seem to want us to take, and I would say, should we be paying green levies and, renewable energy levies at this point in the economic cycle? And the simple answer is no. If you want to take some inflation out of the system, get rid of that levy. It's not fair, it's not right, it shouldn't be charged now, and the government could take action, and they haven't.
The same goes for the national insurance, right?
Oh, that as well. Ugh. OK, well, Alan, look, we've got a whole litany there of actions that they could take. Now Boris has perhaps secured his immediate political future. Perhaps he could focus on what needs to be done to help you, to help me, to help us. And the first thing I would start with And if you listen to this and watch this show on a regular basis, you'll know that I've been banging on about this for a while, that the tax system is too complicated. There are things where they're just slicing and dicing. But here's something that they could do that would really make a difference to you, to me, to us, straight away. If you want to take 5% inflation away and out of the equation, you do it through fuel prices. And they could do it today. They could do it now. And it would make a difference, because I don't know about you, but £100 to fill the average car with fuel is like eye-watering, particularly if you have not had a pay rise. So if you are using your car to get to work because you live in a rural area, if you are using your car or van for your work purposes, and you're trying to make deliveries and you're trying to keep costs under control because you're trying to make sure that you don't price yourself out of the market, how on earth are you going to do that? £100 to fill the average car with fuel. Have you now changed the way that you use your car, that you use your van? 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. Do give me a call. Have your say. This is arguably the biggest story in town. We'll come to the front pages in a moment and just sort of pick out those. And, oh, let's do it now. £100 to fill up a family car, says the Daily Mirror. To spare and fury as fuel prices hit record high. Daily Express, more holiday misery, cost of travel to soar. But also, now that is a promise, PM vows to slash bills. Emboldened Boris Johnson will cut bills left, right and centre in his mind. Get on with it! Stop talking about it! Oh, just a little rant there. Daily Star. I want my mummy. Anxious archaeology students warned they might see old bodies. Talked about that last night on The Talk. The Mail. Lawyers set to ground first Rwanda flight. Ugh. But also forced out, as stories are, city supermum who said Boris was in wrong job. I mean, if you don't believe in your boss and you're prepared to publicly talk about them, then it is time for you to go. I mean, I don't understand why that's... Oh, here we go. Politics. Operation Red Meat, the sequel. PM policy blitz on housing and economy, including future tax cuts. Cut tax now, Boris, please. Wouldn't that help you? Wouldn't that make a difference? £100 to fill the average car with fuel. And that's why I'm asking you, by the way, this morning. I want to know how you use your car. I want to know whether you've changed the way you use your car. And can you afford it? 0344 499 1000. If you call me now, you will get through, because we're going to take more of your calls next here on Talk TV. 20 minutes past 5, early breakfast underway with me, James Max, here on Talk TV, live from the Talk Radio studios, with you until 6:30 when Julia Hartley-Brewer will be here. Talking to you this morning about petrol prices. Why? Because they are in the news. We've done some of the front pages, but there are more, which all cover it. Guardian, fuel cost surge and dire economic forecasters shatter Prime Minister's hopes of a reset. The newspaper, rail strike passengers face 6-day shutdown, but also Operation Red Meat, the sequel, PM policy blitz on housing economy, including future tax cuts. Daily Mail talks about these lawyers set to ground first Rwanda flight. But then let's turn our attention to the Times. Johnson to let benefit claimants buy homes. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on. The Sun talks about Kelly Brook, but also exposed greedy petrol pumps, greedy petrol stations that refuse to pass on the 5p fuel duty cut. 5p fuel duty cut. Why are they bothering with that? Where's the 50p fuel duty cut? That's what we need. Do that, Rishi. You completely take inflation away from the system temporarily. It's probably worth the money, because then interest rates wouldn't have to rise as fast or far. And look how much debt we've got. And every time you put up interest rates, suddenly our money became less effective. Seriously, this is a major issue that we need to tackle now. And it's not about an interventionist government and being all lefty. It's actually about a government that lowers tax, about stopping using tax as almost a sort of green weapon when they don't need to. And they are taking in a lot more money, because every time the price goes up, then it means that they take more VAT, remove the VAT on fuel temporarily whilst we navigate our way through the war in Ukraine and various other things that have put up petrol prices. And that's why I'm asking you. Look, here, front page of the Daily Telegraph. Price of filling up, average car hits £100. Petrol jumps 2p in a single day as the cost of living crisis deals a fresh blow to drivers. That's you, that's me, that's all of us. And that means that for every pound more that they are charging, that's money out of your pocket that you can't spend on something else. And if you didn't have enough money in the first place and you were finding it tough to make ends meet, this means that if you're filling up your car once a week, that's extra 40, 50 quid. Well, that's a whole, evening's entertainment with you and your family. I mean, that's pizza night gone. That's a trip to the movies gone. Though I have to say, the movie is quite expensive at the moment. But, that's a whole load of things gone. I mean, if you think that a Disney Plus subscription is, £6, £7, £8 a month, and then suddenly you've got 40, 50 quid that's... Well, where are you going to find 40 or 50 quid? That could be a couple of your subscriptions gone. That could be... extra data on your mobile phone, gone. That could be your night out, gone. Trip to the pub, gone. I don't know what you're going to cut, but this is a lot of money. £100 to fill up the average car with fuel. Have you changed the way you use your car? Will you think twice every time you get into your car thinking, do I need to drive? Do I need to go to the supermarket? Do I need to go shopping? Shall I walk? Shall I take the bus? Can you use a bus? If you live in a rural area, you've got no choice. Get your bicycle out. 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. Give me a call. Tell me your experience. Tell me how you've changed the way you use your car. And do you agree with me that the government actually needs to act now to help you? Because this is the one thing that they can do, and they seem to be sitting on their hands. Right, let's go back to your calls. Greg is in Edinburgh. Greg, good morning.
Good morning. You've just made my point. This could actually be a glass half full-ish situation. And how many times have you jumped in your car when you know you shouldn't? When you've just been a lazy son of a and saying,
yes,
just nip to the shop for that half mile walk when you don't really need to. How many times do we take kids to school when they're getting packed?
Now, that's one thing I do wonder about, Greg, because when I was growing up, parents didn't really drive their children to school very often. There were a lot of people who took the bus, they walked, they cycled to school, all of that stuff. and you know, people getting their cars almost at the drop of a hat, and maybe this is good. But then, do you think this then pushes people towards the whole idea of, if you can afford it, going electric?
Possibly. I'm just thinking that in some ways that it might be a good thing to do less driving to save money. I know it's a strange way to force us to do that.
I know, but then what's the flip side, Greg, though, is that if we are using our cars less, the things that we still need to buy are still going to cost more to deliver. So if things are costing more to deliver, then that could be a problem. And if we're buying less, then that means that shops are going to struggle, so we might see business failures, we might see people out of work, we might see people being paid less. All of those things have a negative effect, so careful what you wish for, Greg.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, I mean, I'm paying as a driver myself, I know the increases are absolutely appalling, but I know I also sometimes use a car when I know I shouldn't. And also, if you think about it, less car usage is possibly benefits for the environment, for pollution in sort of urban areas and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I haven't noticed any... I mean, look, if you look at any major city, the streets are clogged with delivery vans and small businesses and people operating their own, activities, combined with an awful lot of... cars and minicabs and all that sort of thing. People's personal transport, certainly in urban areas, I mean, that's already been curtailed by things like, the lovely congestion charge and all that sort of stuff.
Well, you should try living in Edinburgh while they're doing the trams, and you'll know horror at the moment. But I was just trying to see a slight... what's the word? The silver
glass half full exercise. Well, Greg, look, it's always nice to look and see if there is a positive spin to any one of our stories, and maybe that's it. Maybe it forces us out of our cars. Greg, thank you for your call. Good to chat. That's Greg in Edinburgh. Do you want to have your say? It's 0344 499 1000 to get involved in the conversation. I mean, arguably, look, as you know, if you listen to the show, I've been an electric car driver for a while. It doesn't mean that I don't use a petrol car, because the other half has a petrol car, and that's the one that, if you go on any length of journey, you've got to use a petrol car, because electric, all very well, great idea, you want to drive across the country, can't use the electric car unless you've got 3 days to do your journey. So that's kind of how we balance it. So the other half has a petrol car, I've got the electric thing, fine. But then the electricity costs, that's gone through the roof. So either way, is stymied. What will you use your car for? Have you changed the way you use your car? Like Greg, do you think that you'll use it less? Let's go to another call. Lawrence is in Greater Manchester. Lawrence, good morning.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Lawrence.
The extending the right to buy.
Oh, yes.
Now let's get it into reality. In 2015, George Osborne told Parliament in the House that he would extend the right to buy and pass it into legislation.
Mm.
Do you remember?
Yes. We're not really talking about that this morning. I want to talk about fuel costs, Lawrence.
Well, in that case, I have no point to make.
Well, make your point about... Because we're going to be talking about houses and the extending right to buy and whether it's a good idea. We're going to be doing that with Charlie Bannon in about 15 minutes' time. But why don't you give me your perspective, and then we'll see what Charlie...
Charlie Bannon can say what he wants. Maybe I can say what I want.
Yeah, go for it.
When George Osborne was into the legislation, he was going to pass legislation, and they didn't pass legislation.
Mm.
And, of course, what he did was the housing associations, as you know, a powerful lobby, decided, well, no, it's just not really a good idea. So we'll have a few pilots. We'll pass it off to Sheffield University, who will pay them considerable sums of money to consider it work and talk about it, and it just vanished into the ether. And this is exactly what's going to happen now. This,
So do you think we should have the right to buy?
Well, you should if you're going to allow the right to buy, that's fine. The point about it is Boris Johnson is saying it as if he invented it. And as you know, my personal views in previous calls we've had, this is a charlatan act again. This will come to nothing. It will come to absolutely nothing.
So do you think that, I mean, I take the view that this is Boris Johnson's chance. He has to deliver, and he has to stop with the bluster, because if he doesn't, he's
never going to
toast.
stop with the bluster, is he?
Well, he's always going to bluster, but I think if he can demonstrate that he's actually done something, I mean, what I find disappointing, well, look...
The right to buy...
I mean, personally, I think that the right to buy is all very well, but I wish that they'd stop taking old, rehashed political ideas. I want some new ideas and I want some new policies.
Well, what I'm asking you, James, is do you think he will follow through with the idea?
I think on right to buy, I think he probably will, yes.
But he'll never have the chance to do it, will he? Because he'll go into the process of saying, well, they have to, it's passed on now into legislation, and I've only got 2 years in power. It's crap.
No, I think they probably will.
Be honest, James.
No, I think they probably will, but I just wonder whether the policy is going to be as effective, because one of the big problems with right to buy, which I think was a brilliant policy, it was a fantastic way for Margaret Thatcher when she did it, to get the housing stock off the balance sheet, because people forget about housing. It's not about the cost of building it, it's the cost of maintenance. As soon as you send it into the private sector or away from your balance sheet, you don't have to maintain it anymore, and it saves you, the government and local government, a huge amount of money, and that was a brilliant move. What they didn't do was they didn't replace it, and they didn't provide an alternative, and when the housing stock's gone, it's gone. The big problem, Lawrence, is we have a whole range of cost of living crises, and if Boris Johnson doesn't act and his government doesn't act, then our nation is not going to be able to do the reinvention and benefit from the likes of Brexit and various other things that it needs to do.
Well, look, let's be fair. He's not telling the truth. He's not going to react or act on this thing that he calls about giving people the right to buy their property. And
yeah, I mean, I get the view, Lawrence. You know, you think he's not going to act through, but there we go. Lawrence, thank you for your call. Good chat. So that's Lawrence. Going off subject, but why not? It's your choice. Let's talk, though, about petrol, though. Let's go back to the cost of filling a tank of fuel in an average car, £100 or more. Jeff is in Stoke-on-Trent. Jeff, good morning.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Jeff. What would you like to tell me?
Well, the rise in price in fuel.
Yes.
I'm 73, and I can't afford to fill my car up on my pension.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a new car, but I certainly can't afford to fill it up to a full tank. And I have changed my habits of how I use the car, how often I use the car, where I go in the car.
What's gone?
At the same time,
what's gone from your life, Jeff? What are you not using the car for anymore?
Local shopping, where I suppose it was idleness. You know, you think, well, you know, training, so I'll get in the car and drive there. Now I'll wait till the rain stops and walk there. Simple things like that. So,
I mean, part of my diet help was instead of driving to the supermarket, walk to the supermarket, and if you can't carry it home, then you shouldn't buy it. And I know that, but then for some people, Jeff, you know, if you're older or infirm or you know, carrying that shopping, that's a struggle. I mean, does that mean that, I don't know, we're going to have to go back to the 1970s? People are going to get shopping trolleys, particularly tartan ones. I mean, I do feel. I mean, I've always wanted a tartan shopping trolley, and maybe that's what we've got to do. We've got to channel our inner 1970s. The people behind the glass are now looking at me as if I've gone completely bonkers, and I want to rename myself Betty. But things like this, though, we're gonna have to take some radical action, aren't we?
Yes, true. I mean, I'm due to fill up my car when I finish speaking to you, actually.
Yeah.
But I will, you know, only probably put about £20-30 worth in, where it used to cost me £50 for a full tank. I dread to think what it's showing low at the moment. You know, I need to fill it. But
and what you say, though, because I mean, look, that we can be funny about it, and we can talk about, you know, what we could do and the things that we all know that we're in this country, up and down this country. We know that we're fortunate compared to many places around the world where, you know, we live a really privileged lifestyle in many respects. So the fact that we're talking about fuel and cars and the fact that it's almost like normalised that everybody has them. You go to all sorts of countries around the world, it's a super luxury. That having been said, people use their cars in all sorts of different ways, and we've relied in our society. Government could act, because they do take 50-60% of every single litre of fuel that you buy, that is tax. The government could act, and yet they've chosen not to. And it's this inactivity that really infuriates me.
I agree. I mean, when you cast your mind back to, I can't even remember now, the fuel crisis where lorry drivers, lorry companies blockaded depots because of the rise in petrol. I mean, is it going to go back to people power again? I mean, I'm not saying that we should have riots or this, that, and the other. I wouldn't condone anything like that. But
I wonder whether it's the power of the media and also us, that the media have stoked us up into getting all excited about Partygate and all these other things when all the serious stuff has been going on. And I'm not trying to negate or remove the importance of having politicians with integrity and going down that rabbit hole. But when things are going on, which they are, and there are straightforward solutions that will help you, me, us live our lives, to get on with our lives, and because of all the noise going on elsewhere, it means that politicians are not doing their job and they're focusing on their own personal survival and careers. It means that nothing gets done. I want stuff to be done. There are things that they could do. And this government seems to be very slow to take action, and the opposition are so interested in fighting political games and settling political scores that they forget to come up with any policies themselves. Where is Sir Keir Starmer saying, oh, by the way, to solve this crisis, we could take 5% off inflation and we could solve people's immediate bill problems by just temporarily reducing the amount of fuel duty in a litre of fuel, and we'll take it down by 30p and we'll regulate companies to make sure they pass it on to the consumer. It's not hard to do, and it would make such a difference, and then we can all get on with our lives and sort out the next problem.
Exactly. I mean, going back to that fuel crisis in the 70s, I was out of the country at the time, thankfully. The thing is, that was just fuel crisis was just one price increase. Fuel. I mean, how we're living at the moment, everything's increasing.
Everything's going up, and this is going to be the subject that we continue to talk about. Jeff, must leave it there just for time reasons. Thank you so much for your call, though. That's Jeff in Stoke-on-Trent. Meanwhile, before he even boils over with froth, let's speak to Dr. Roger Givalby, CEO of Fair Money, personal finance and credit expert. Dr. Roger, good morning to you.
Good morning, James.
Let's talk about another nice mess. Now, you sent me a thing that said, here's another nice mess you've gotten us into, Stanley. And I was thinking, what's my dog done? I'm assuming you don't mean Stanley, my dog. It's somebody else.
No. Well, it's a famous line from Laurel and Hardy, if you recall.
I do, but, you know, that's
and Stanley,
not why...
Stanley, of course, is Boris's father, so I just thought I'd throw that in there and say...
Oh, I see. Well done, you. Yeah. All right, what are you getting excited about?
Well, no sooner does the Jubilee weekend conclude with even more elegance and grace than I personally think the Queen has ever mustered before, then we find ourselves at the absolute other end of the plumbing, James, in a political crisis that you simply couldn't make up. In the midst of a potential new COVID wave, the ever-accelerating cost of living crisis and the never-ending Ukraine war, we find ourselves with the distinct possibility of our soon becoming a leaderless nation, totally leaderless. As Piers Morgan asked the other night here on Talk TV, how can you go forward united for the next general election with a leader that almost half of his party doesn't want? And worse, the Lib Dems, it's understood, may very well soon call for a parliamentary no-confidence vote. And if the 148 anti-Boris Tories vote against him again, as they did in their own Conservatives' no-confidence vote, together with all the others in Parliament who are likewise disposed, he could be removed as Prime Minister. In the extreme, he could also be found guilty of serious enough crimes to be barred from Parliament. So if either of these events happened, and they could happen very soon, do we see an obvious leader to step in? I don't.
Well, I don't see an obvious leader. I just wish that we could just get on, move on, and just deal with the problems. So this is why I'm talking about fuel. I know you want to talk about that in a moment. However, as time marches on, Roger, let's talk about some good news from America.
Yeah, there is some very good news from America. The Bank of America has just come out with a report saying that they're finding investor behavior very puzzling. Investors are not battening down the hatches and building defensive investment portfolios. In fact, they're still buying tech stocks despite the huge tech fall and all the predictions of a dire summer ahead for tech. rather than defensive stocks like healthcare and financials and things like that. Everyday investors have simply not positioned their portfolios for an economic downturn. So although Morgan Stanley, your fave, is now saying
my fave? I used to work there.
Yeah, but every time you say Morgan
still
Stanley
got the
said
underpants.
something, you go, yeah, they're right.
Well, not always, actually. I have to say
not always, of course.
Not always. Look, everybody who predicts the future generally gets it wrong most of the time.
Well, there's consistency, you see.
Exactly.
So even though Morgan Stanley say that Apple and Microsoft and others are going to dive this summer, many U.S. investors and institutions are nevertheless predicting that now there is not going to be a recession, and the Fed, with everything they're doing, the Federal Reserve, is not going to be able to push the states into a recession. So it's very bright news, which will obviously float over to these shores very soon, I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, let's just talk a little bit about your views about what you describe as a petrol bomb. We've been discussing petrol prices this morning. I dare say there's going to be some more of it in a moment as well. But what do you make of it?
Well, I heard, and I agree with pretty much everything that people have said, but I think there's another perspective here. I think the biggest problem, and it doesn't get mentioned enough, is that the instability of our political situation, the crisis that we're in right now, and everything else that has caused the pound to become so weak has it's a perfect storm. It's hit the petrol price at the same time that the crude oil price, which is, of course, denominated in dollars, has gone up to an unbelievable $135 a barrel. At the beginning of the pandemic, as you know, it was actually minus $38 a barrel. It was negative. So we've got a falling pound and a rising oil price, and that is simply a huge factor in the 2 pounds that some people up north in Gateshead are now charging per litre.
But this is also exacerbated by the fact that the government don't want to admit how much tax they are charging in every single litre of fuel, and they need to act, in my view, right now. This is a crisis right now, and 5p won't wash. You know, it's just like, oh, well done, Rishi Sunak, 5p. It's like, no, have a look, suspend the VAT temporarily until this has passed. If you do that, if you reduce inflation quickly and immediately, you take it systemically out of the system, number one, you strengthen the pound in terms of stability, you move the economy forward because people aren't so worried about having less money in their pockets, and it fixes a whole range of things, doesn't it? Am I right?
I mean, totally. I didn't say that the weakness in the dollar is an excuse for the government. I think the weakness in the dollar, together with the war in Ukraine, the general cost of living crisis, the 6 different factors which are particular to the UK about why fuel prices have risen, all of these things are reasons why the government should stop having these insane committee meetings and publishing these papers and take one giant swipe at this.
There we go, Roger. The frothing has to stop. We've run out of time, but it's wonderful as ever to speak to you. That's Dr. Roger Givo, CEO of Fair Money, personal finance and credit expert. Right, next, we are going to find out about the Prime Minister's extending the right to buy scheme, whether it will work, and also we'll be speaking to Myron Jobson about some more big finance stories. That's all coming up on Talk TV. And a very good morning to you. If you just joined us here on Talk TV, it's me, James Max, with you till 6:30. Live from the Talk Radio studios, talking to you this morning about the cost of living crisis, and in particular, the front pages of many of your papers, which focus on the cost of fuel. Yesterday, price of a litre of petrol up by 2p, hitting over £100 to fill up the average family car. So I'm asking you not only about how you afford it, but also how have you changed the way you use your car? Can you afford to fill it? Are you using your car in the same way, or have you adapted it? And do you think that this is now the stage at which the government have to step in? They've got to do something. Because interestingly enough, Nick has just sent me a link and said, well, you do realise that oil prices are not as high as they have been. And I was thinking, oh, hang on a second, are you sure about that? And he's absolutely right. Our Currency, Your Problem is an article that he sent me to. Brent crude is 20% below its 2008 level. Its record, though, in euros, sterling and other currencies means that our currencies are weaker. And that's because it's denominated in oil, in dollars, and that's because of the strength of the US currency, largely driven by tech and other things. So this isn't about a cost of oil per se. This is our currency, the economic management, and things that the government can do, which goes back to my point. Government, Boris, do something now. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number to say how you changed the way, though, that you use your car, and do you want to see the government take some action, an immediate action? Do they need to help you? Meanwhile, let's turn our attention, still sorting out your personal finances. We'll have a quick word now with Myron Jobson, Senior Analyst at Interactive Investor. Joins me now. Myron, good morning.
Good morning to you, James.
So, look, let's talk very briefly about house prices. There are some people who keep saying, oh, we're going to have some kind of house price crash or whatever. I don't take that view until or unless we see a significant spike in interest rates. There'd be a price standoff. We might see a slowing. We might see the froth coming off the market. Crash, I don't see it. But what does the Halifax say?
So Halifax are saying that house prices have reached the average price of an average UK home has hit another record high of just under £289,000, and this represents a month-on-month increase of 1%, and a yearly increase of 10.5%. And so house prices are still going up, but it's the rate of the increase has slowed somewhat since the beginning of the year. But honestly, James, it still remains tough out there for people who are looking to buy a home because of this affordability squeeze, so to speak, with mortgage rates going up because interest rates are going up. I mean, interest rates have gone up 4 times in 6 months, raising mortgage rates, while those people who are still on the fixed rate deal can have received the same interest as they have been doing. Once that deal is up, they'll find out that then their new mortgage rate will be significantly higher than what they were paying before. So
yeah, exactly. So certainly understanding not only the current costs but also the future costs. Should you take out a mortgage, what that means for your monthly payments, whether you can afford it. You never want to be in a position where you are unable to afford those mortgage repayments and to get yourself into a spiral of debt or inability to pay. Meanwhile, talking about that, let's talk about buy now, pay later research. Citizens Advice have some for us.
Yeah, so they did some research which found that 51% of people aged between 18 and 34% who've taken out a buy now, pay later purchase have actually had taken out a loan of some form to cover these purchases, and this compares to 39% of people aged between 35 and 54%, and 24% of over 55s. And this is quite worrying because the whole idea of taking out a loan to actually meet buy now, pay later arrangements, it's quite baffling because loan with buy now, pay later, one of the main draws is that you don't have to pay any if you meet even if you don't meet the range repayment time periods, you don't have to pay fees for most of the main providers. But if you're taking out a loan to cover these arrangements, it just defeats the purpose.
Well, it defeats the purpose, but also we need to understand what people are doing and the dangers of filling up your shortfall in money coming in and money going out by shuffling the deck chairs around the deck of the Titanic, and by going off and buy now, pay later, these things will come back to bite. As you say, you can buy it now, you can have it now, but if you don't pay when they ask you to pay, the costs are eye-watering. Filling it out, as you say, with a high-cost personal loan could very well defeat the purpose. Meanwhile, just a very quick word on some latest savings stats from the Hmrc.
Yeah, so in the 2020-2021 tax year, it felt like cash ISA, that saying cash is king. That statement is still true, but it's somewhat waned. So that tax year, which I remind listeners, that was a COVID tax year, wasn't it? A lot of people ended up opening up a stocks and shares ISA. So stocks share ISA account opened and reached a new record high of 3.6 million, and with subscriptions also reaching a new high of 34 billion. But I suppose this is somewhat juxtaposed by a fall in cash ISA and also a fall in contributions and also subscriptions to accounts opened of adults ISA in general. And I suppose it shows that, that it was a tale of haves and has not. So during the pandemic, a lot of people lost income because of losing jobs or reduced working hours, whereas others became accidental savers because they couldn't spend money on
Well, exactly. And then, I suppose, it's all about managing our finances and making sure that savings are there for when you need them. Myron, thank you so much for joining us. That's Myron Jobson from Interactive Investor. Let's turn our attention, though, now to property and property investment. Let's speak to Charlie Bannon, Sales Director at House & House. Charlie, good morning.
Morning, James. How are you?
Yeah, really well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, just before we talk about the Prime Minister's extent to the right to buy scheme, some people might be thinking about where on earth do we invest in choppy markets? Where on earth do we go? You might say to them, well, invest overseas. Is that a bonkers idea, or should people consider investing in real estate, and should they consider going overseas?
Well, I think the reason why people do consider Dubai as an alternative investment to the UK for property is probably tax benefits, income tax-free. VAT is obviously only 5% in Dubai as opposed to most places in Europe and worldwide. The returns, the rental returns, you're looking at 5 to 7% net, and obviously the opportunity for capital growth with the plans to increase the population from Dubai government up to 6 million by 2040.
I mean, it does rather mean that you need to like Dubai as a location. I mean, I don't want to be rude about it, but I can't think of anywhere worse to go on holiday.
How comes?
I mean, sorry, but I guess you have to kind of like it, don't you? I mean, persuade me otherwise. Persuade me that I should be spending my holiday in Dubai rather than, the beauties of France or Italy or Spain.
Well, James, you don't need to come, right? But obviously the people that do want to come because it's year-long sunshine, it's a great place to live, world-class beaches, restaurants, plenty to see and do. 8 months of the year, it's fantastic weather, plenty of golf courses.
Okay, all right, you're turning me. I'm interested. If you're an investor...
If you play golf, definitely come out, James. I think that was the clincher.
Oh, no, you've ruined it again. Golf is a good walk ruined. Just very briefly, if people want to find out more, though, about this, where can they go? Where can they have a look? And where can they see where they might get some returns or otherwise?
Well, they can pop to our website, houseandhouse.com, and obviously reach out to any of our investment advisors. We're well versed on discussing the benefits of investing into real estate, how to do it, and then what sort of returns they can expect to see in the market.
Certainly interesting times. And I guess, in a word, Prime Minister's extend to right to buy. Is that a good idea, or does it exacerbate housing market problems in your view, Charlie?
Very hard for me to comment, as I'm not as in touch with the UK market as I probably should be. However, as long as people aren't, I think you spoke to the gentleman before, as long as people aren't over lending or over borrowing and putting themselves in financial difficulty, then it can only help. But I think if that's going to turn to the other side, it's going to cause a problem for everyone, right?
Charlie, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And, thank you for opening our eyes to investment over in Dubai. That's Charlie Bannon from House & House. Meanwhile, next, we turn our attention to the papers with Tim Jatisky, and that's going to be after the latest news headlines at 6.
TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 6.
Good morning, I'm Emily Rose Adams. Boris Johnson is set to announce new measures to boost home ownership as he looks to increase support from his own MPs. In a speech in Lancashire today, the Prime Minister is expected to announce right-to-buy extensions to those who currently rent from housing associations and plans for lower-paid workers to use housing benefits to buy homes. It comes days after Monday's no-confidence vote in his leadership, in which 4 in 10 of his own MPs voted against him. The average cost of filling up a family car is expected to have reached £100 for the first time ever, with official figures released later today. It comes as the British Chamber of Commerce warns Britain's economic growth will slow this year, while inflation is set to hit 10% in the final quarter of 2022. The US House of Representatives has voted to raise the minimum age for buying semi-automatic guns from 18 to 21. The measure is part of a wide-ranging bill on gun control measures, although it's unlikely to pass through the US Senate and become law. The House heard testimony from survivors of last month's school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, in which 19 children and 2 teachers were killed. 11-year-old Mia Cirillo described how she smeared blood on herself and pretended to be dead to stay safe.
He shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and put it all over me.
Do you feel safe at school? Why not?
Because I don't want it to happen again.
Ukraine's president says the fighting in the eastern city of Severodonetsk will determine the outcome of the war in the east of the country. Volodymyr Zelensky says his troops were inflicting major losses on Russian forces, but have been pushed to the outskirts of the city.
Severodonetsk remains the epicenter of the encounter in the Donbass. We are defending our positions and are inflicting tangible losses to the enemy. This is a very brutal battle, very tough, perhaps one of the most difficult throughout this war. Largely, this is where the fate of the Donbass is being decided now.
The age at which people can buy cigarettes and tobacco should be raised every year, a review will recommend. The government hopes to eradicate smoking by 2030, and experts argue raising the legal age is crucial to achieving that. But The Times reports that ministers will reject the proposals. And Twitter will give Elon Musk access to daily data on millions of tweets in a bid to avoid the billionaire pulling out of a £35 million takeover deal. The world's richest man has concerns about how many fake accounts are on the social media platform. And now it's time for today's weather.
Times Business sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello, I'm Nazanin Gaffer. Wet and windy weather from the west over the next few days. We are seeing the remnants of Tropical Storm Alex heading towards northern parts of the UK through Friday and Saturday. It's going to bring very windy conditions there. And interestingly, over the next few days, we are also going to see high or very high pollen levels due to the fact that it's going to turn increasingly windy, but also temperatures are going to be rising, especially across southern areas. And we've seen quite a lot of rain recently. As a result, that means there's a lot of grass about, and lots of grass pollen levels are going to be high too, mainly across England and Wales. So for today, we are starting off mostly fine and dry, but out towards the southwest, it's already cloudy with some patchy outbreaks of rain. Cloudy across parts of the north as well, brighter further south. That band of rain will be moving its way eastwards through today, mainly reaching central and western parts of the UK, where it will be mostly cloudy with some patchy outbreaks of rain. But across eastern Scotland and eastern parts of England, it looks mostly fine and bright. Then for Friday and for Saturday, as I mentioned, we are going to see the remnants of Tropical Storm Alex approaching northern parts of the UK. It's going to bring very windy conditions across these areas, choppy waters, gales likely around parts of the coast, but calmer across parts of the south, mainly dry and bright.
Sunday Times Culture sponsors Talk TV weather.
The biggest issue in Britain right now is the cost of living crisis. Energy bills have become ridiculous. Second biggest issue, extraordinarily, is nobody can define what a woman is.
to you. It's 4 minutes past 6 o'clock. It's early breakfast with me, James Max, here on Talk TV Live from the Talk Radio studios with you till 6:30, when Julia Hartley-Brewer will be here for your breakfast show. Meanwhile, we're going to be turning our attention to the papers. Going to be joined live in the studio by Tim Jachiski, who is Director of Reputation at the PHA Group. We'll be finding out what he's been up to, but also going through the front pages and finding out about the wave of strikes. We'll be talking about fuel costs. It's everywhere in the papers today, but also some other plans from the government, including a plan to raise the smoking age. Good idea? We'll be finding out about that. We'll also find out about a controversial statement from the TikTok boss and lawyers having a little crack at a government flagship policy. All of those stories. Plus, we'll take some more of your calls and comments on this. Despair and fury as fuel prices rise and continue to rise. It now costs over £100 to fill up the average tank in a family car with petrol or diesel. So, have you changed the way you use your car? And do you think the government need to take some assertive action? And would you agree with me that that action means cutting the VAT, cutting the fuel tax, temporarily, but immediately? 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. You can tweet at Talk TV or at the James Max if you want to have your say. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to take more of your calls and comments this morning. It's 0344 499 1000. Call me now. You will get through, and then we'll take some more of your calls and comments. Meanwhile, time to say very good morning to Tim Jachiski, Director of Reputation at the PHA Group. We'll find out a little bit more about what he's been up to. But meanwhile, Tim, we have a job to do, and good morning to you.
Good morning, James.
So, let's just whip our way through the front pages. The Daily Telegraph, price of filling up average car hits £100. We'll talk about that in a minute. Meanwhile, the Tory peer has quit Whitehall role after criticising the Prime Minister, and this is Baroness Morrissey. The Tory peer has quit as a non-executive director at the Foreign Office after she said Boris Johnson should stand down. I mean, I don't actually know why people are surprised. I'm sorry, if you are in a government position, if you are appointed by the government and you decide that your leader isn't right for you, you know, get rid.
Yeah, I mean, I think she jumped before she was pushed, but clearly, if you don't believe in the person who's running the government, then that's the right thing to do anyway, I think.
Also on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, they talked about the story, the appeasement of religious mobs by government and councils will undermine social cohesion. This is a senior advisor warning today in the wake of the Islamic protests about a film. This is Dame Sarah Khan, the government's independent advisor on social cohesion and resilience. I think she's absolutely spot on with what she said. Quite how or why these groups... I mean, if you were advising one of these cinema groups and they said, we've got quite a lot of protests going on outside, what do we do? I mean, I think they've just bent over themselves, and I think this does nothing for free speech, and in fact it exacerbates the problem, and it just shows the gulf, if you like, that we are going to see between different kinds of religious organisations and groups who think, if anybody thinks that just because they don't like something it can be protested off and cancelled, what a terrible place to be in a country that stands up for free speech.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the easy way out, and unfortunately we do see, you know, quite often that is a decision that corporate entities make because they know it is the easy thing to do, not necessarily the right thing to do.
We'll talk about the summer of discontent shortly. Meanwhile, the Sun newspaper focuses on the wedding of Kelly Brook. I can imagine that's definitely on your front page. Yeah?
I must admit, I was quite stunned to see that as the story that the Sun could manage today. 37-year-old model gets married.
Yeah, OK. I mean, I think they're just trying to distract away from the fact that there are three stories on the front page of The Sun. There's that one to distract us from the fact that everything's going to hell in a handcart. Then they've got the one that tells us that it is going to hell in a handcart because exposed greedy petrol pumps, although they're making a fuss about passing on the 5p fuel duty, it makes no difference. I want 50p cut. Look at the price of fuel in Malta. It's just over £1 a litre. Why? Because they don't tax it so much. And then they've got the £180 million winners. How do they splash the cash? And I think you might be surprised by one of their answers, but I think it's a very good bit of PR puff. Oh, hang on a second. The Times says, go green. Times Earth, your 12-page guide inside. They've got electric scooters and everything. I can imagine you're on top of it. Johnson to let benefit claimants buy homes, though, is on the front page. And they've got Sir David Attenborough, who's been knighted again.
Yes, I thought he had every honour that going, but he's got another one.
Well, but I'm waiting for somebody to introduce the honour of a national treasure. Just call it the National Treasures Award. Meanwhile, Daily Star talks about anxious archaeology students warned that they might see old bones. This is a trigger warning which has been given by their university. It's like, I'd fire the person who did the trigger warning. I mean, it's like, really, it's what kind of idiot are you? Daily Express. Now, that is a promise. PM vows to slash bills. This is the time that Boris Johnson has got to stop blustering, and he's actually got to do something, hasn't he?
Yeah, this is the speech he's making, which elsewhere has been denounced as a load of hot air and waffle, but the Express have taken it at face value.
Yeah, it's just... I mean, he's got a year, but if, for example, he simplified some tax, if he did some things that Conservatives really want him to do, and, for example, at least temporarily get rid of the greenwash in our taxation system and got rid of some of the petrol price, just to say, whilst you're suffering various things, we're going to remove 50p off a litre until we can afford to pay it again, and then you can pay, you know, then that would be great. But for some reason he doesn't seem to want to do that.
Yeah, there's stories elsewhere about tax cuts being ruled out this autumn, and supposedly saving it up for a big bang in 2024. Might be too late for him by then. Too late.
Daily Mirror, £100 to fill up family car. I mean, it's just too much. I think, you know, particularly as oil prices have not risen to their 2008 levels, and it's exacerbating and it's showing the weakness of our pound, which again is due to weakness of government. You're thinking, you know, this is not good. This is not good. Daily Mail, we'll be talking about the story. Lawyers set to ground the first Rwanda flight. The I newspaper, rail strike, passengers face 6 days shut down. It's what they focus on. And The Guardian. Let's just focus on this story for a moment, because I know that you want to. Fuel cost surge and dire economic forecast shatter the Prime Minister's hope of a reset. This is a really difficult story, though, for the Prime Minister. I mean, look, it's inevitable that The Guardian's going to focus on it and have a crack, but, you know, if the Prime Minister is stuck between a rock and a hard place, and we've got these economic difficulties, frankly, he hasn't got a hope in hell of restoring his political lead unless he's able to restore at top level economic fortune and people's pockets at the other side and scale. If he can't do those two things, he's toast.
Yeah, and I think this is a reminder that for all the kind of attention on Partygate, really what in the end sort of kills prime ministers is the economy. It always has been. Will you feel better off when you go to the ballot box? At the moment, I mean, the OECD is saying that growth is still, by 2023 there'll be zero growth in this country, and of course we've got everywhere, as you say, petrol prices, biggest single rise in 17 years. There has to be some good news somewhere on the economic front, otherwise he is toast.
And if you could look back in history, that's kind of what did it for Margaret Thatcher. There are lots of things that did it for Margaret Thatcher. But fundamentally, the economy wasn't going well. We were heading into recession. There were a whole range of difficulties that were there, and people didn't feel wealthy. They didn't feel good about what they were doing. Tony Blair was kind of forced out by Gordon Brown, and he had his first 100 days, couldn't fault it, and then everything just completely went pear-shaped. Everything he touched turned to the manure from hell, and then it was just an economic disaster, one after the other. Theresa May, she went, I mean, arguably it was over policy, but it's also because people weren't going to see the Brexit, dividend, and things were proving difficult. And this could be the problem for Boris Johnson, unless he stops talking and taking some action. But also there's a danger that he takes too much action. He'd be better to store up his firepower and have a couple of big bazookas than a whole raft of stuff and looking, rather like an over-industrious rule maker.
Yeah, one of the things about Boris Johnson, he doesn't really have an obvious ideology. So, if you ask me what his approach is in terms of economic policy, I'd be hard pushed to tell you, because he is a pragmatist. That can be an advantage, but also, at least with Margaret Thatcher, people knew where she stood in terms of the economy.
Do you think he needs to really work out what ideology he should pin his tail to the proverbial donkey to? And should he be saying, I am a tax cutter, I am somebody who believes in... I mean, there are those words. He said, he dropped the F-bomb about business. I think he needs to reaffirm his relationship with business. I think he needs to reaffirm his relationship with police and law and order. He needs to reaffirm his relationship with, and this is the Conservative Party's relationship, with defence. and then he needs to reaffirm his relationship with low tax.
Yeah, I think his relationship with business is shattered. I can't remember a Prime Minister, Tory Prime Minister, who's had such a bad relationship with, with the business community. And I think, that really goes to the heart of some of his issues. Either he's going to be a sort of big state, one nation Tory, or he's going to be a tax cutter, but he's sort of somewhere in between.
He is somewhere in between, and I'm afraid he is going to have to take some action. Look, we'll take some more stories from you, Tim, in just a few moments' time. If you want to get involved in the conversation, of course, it's 0344 499 1000. Have you changed the way you use your car? We'll take some of the comments also that you've given us on the socials as well. Anyway, we will turn our attention to those stories. That's next here on Talk TV. So going through the papers with Tim Jatisky, he's Director of Reputation at the PHA Group. Look, Tim, let's turn our attention to the wave of strikes that are going to trigger possibly a summer of discontent. This is in today's Telegraph.
Yeah, it's sort of bandied around a lot, isn't it, this sort of phrase, winter of discontent, summer of discontent. But I think this one, we've got the rail strikes we know about later this month. The Telegraph points out there's also ballots going to take place with BT workers, baggage handlers at Stansted Airport. In the autumn, we've got local government workers all having ballots. And if there is a wave of politically motivated strike action, again, very bad news for
And this is partly why I keep saying that I think the government needs to take action on fuel prices, because if they are able to suck some inflation out of the system and immediately, then it takes the heat out of these conversations. Because otherwise, you know what, I do have sympathy with workers who say, I can't keep up with the pace of living, I can't keep up. It is a fair and reasonable thing to say, I should be in the same financial position as I was in last year or the year before, and I'm not because of these cost prices, particularly when you've got energy prices that have jumped by 40-50%, and then you've got food and other prices which have gone up by 10. You know, to be a couple of percent down, fair enough. But if you are facing those significant rises, it is fair and reasonable that somebody says, you are going to have to give me a pay rise this year.
Yeah, I think that's right. And if you look at the local government workers, they've submitted an 11.1% claim. Now, 6 months ago, we would have thought that's outlandish. But actually, you know, now with inflation topping 10%, as you say, it's just little more than standing still.
So we will have to see exactly what happens there. If, and I do ask you this every time, Tim, but it seems to get worse every time we have a discussion. If you were giving the Prime Minister some advice on how to repair his reputation, after all, this is what you do, what could he do?
Well, you know, that's a question that needs a very long answer. But in simple terms, I think that there needs to be quite a decisive set of policies. I think what I worry about slightly is what he's got today is a so-called relaunch, which, you know, is talking about allowing people to, you know, extending the right to buy and so on. But it's a hot air policy without anything really behind it. I'd rather see quite a sort of small number of really targeted and clever proposals rather than an attempt to do a lot of things without any real sort of, you know, impact.
And that's also the point of execution, and we were discussing that earlier when we were talking about is Boris Johnson's ability to go beyond the bluster and actually do something. And I would say that if he doesn't tackle the cost of fuel, he is going to have a major problem, because if inflation becomes endemic and built in within our system, he's not going to have the money or the resource to give people the pay rises that they need at government level, and we're going to end up in a real bigger mess. OK, let's talk about, though, another policy, though, which I think is kind of interesting, I suppose. Plan to raise smoking age. Is it going to be successful, do you think?
Well, this is an independent review the government commissioned, and the suggestion is it's actually going to be watered down in terms of how the government responds to it, because I think New Zealand has got a law where every year they raise the smoking age, and I think this is going to be the proposal in the report, but the suggestion is that the Prime Minister has been advised that would be a very bad idea because it's too nanny state.
But also, doesn't it send the wrong message? Because if you've got 17 to drive a car, 18 to drink alcohol, 16 to get married, or, you know, go off and, I think, is it 16 or 18 to join the army? I mean, there are all sorts of different ages. You've got to kind of make a decision. And then, do you really want to end up looking like the United States of America, where they have this ridiculous system where you're not allowed to drink alcohol until you're 21? And we all know that in every frat house up and down the United States of America, alcohol is smuggled in this shape or form, or older brothers, older sisters, friends, you know, family, whatever. It's just a mess, and it's almost unenforceable. And if the law is unenforceable, we all know what happens.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's quite a blunt instrument. And there are a lot of other sort of measures that can be taken. I'm sure will be contained in this report. But what I think is quite interesting, again, talking about ideology, is the Prime Minister's advisers, I think, telling him, look, this looks too nanny state. This is not what a Conservative Prime Minister does, and advising him to reject the report.
I think he's right. I think it should go. I think it's a complete waste of time, effort and money, and actually it detracts from what we need to do. And what we need to do is we need to focus on the things that are really impacting our economy, and also to drive forward. And I want to see more investment come into the United Kingdom. I want to see more changes come through which are funded by the private sector, not necessarily the government just spending money that they haven't got. And you can do that. I mean, you can get the private sector to build an awful lot, to put in huge amounts of investment, if you provide them with a platform to do so. And again, channeling one's inner Margaret is probably the right thing to do. Look at what she did with enterprise zones, look how effective they were, and look at the changes that they brought to areas around the country. Yeah, I mean, Boris Johnson would say he's doing that with his levelling up agenda, but obviously there was criticism yesterday from the audit committee of the way that the money's been spent. And again, it goes back to what does he actually stand for? If he was to leave office tomorrow, what would his legacy be? Hard to tell, really. I think his legacy would be a lot of mess. I'm afraid. Meanwhile, let's talk about an article in the Times, which is kind of buried away, but it's a little bit interesting, about the TikTok boss. What do they said?
Yeah, it's extraordinary, really, and this shows a sort of culture clash, really. So TikTok, which is Chinese-owned, there's a senior director who has been told to take some time off after making some comments saying that he didn't believe maternity leave should be allowed. This really highlights the sort of culture clash between workers in this country with a Chinese ownership. They're being told to work more than 12 hours a day. Apparently, if they go on annual leave, they're removed from client accounts. There have been a lot of complaints from the staff at TikTok.
They certainly have, and it just shows you also how important some different protections are. I mean, I think, making sure that people have maternity leave and even paternity leave, all sorts of things which I think are important for family life, demonstrating, and this is what happens when you have a competitive job market, because it used to be that you joined a company and you stayed there pretty much forever, and if you moved, people raised their eyebrows as if to say, oh, what's wrong with them? Why have they moved firm? Whereas, in fact, now, you stay at a company for 2 years, you're done in terms of your CV, your reputation, really nobody cares. And if you stay at a company for a long period of time, people now raise their eyebrows in the same way that it used to be, oh, I'm part of a family business. Oh, yes, of course, I've worked my way up and, started off in the post room, and then, I've taken over the family business. And now everybody goes, you didn't get there because you're any good. You got there because it's the family business. And it's almost, it's almost verboten to do it. It's just, there's no good thing about going into a family business. Do you think that attitude has changed in terms of how we, work and operate?
Yeah, I definitely think, particularly sort of, Gen Z is, they're moving around much more frequently. I think the other thing that happens now is employers have to work really hard to retain good staff. Culture is so important. And
how do you fix culture in a company? I mean, if the company does have rotten culture, if you've got people who behave in a certain way that's just unacceptable, if you have, you might have your star performers in a business that they bring in the most money, the most revenue, the most this, that, and the other. But you can't have it that they can behave in a certain way anymore. I mean, in my previous life, I had to sort of deal with certain situations. It's like, I don't actually care how good you are or how much money you bring in. If you break the rules, you are out.
Yeah, and I know it's a bit of a truism, but it starts at the top, and unless it's sort of embedded, in the boardroom, it will never trickle down.
And that is that. And is that why we're having so many discussions about Boris Johnson? Which is, if you aren't prepared to lead by example, then that's always going to cause problems.
I think that's absolutely goes to the heart of it. Is people. The culture in number 10, I think, is rotten.
Yeah, well, I think that, it's pretty simply said. Let's have, in a line or two, this story in the Mail. Lawyers setting to ground the first Rwanda flight. I mean, everybody trying their best. It's difficult to encapsulate in a sentence, but let's do it.
Yeah, it was inevitable. Flagship policy, migrants sent to Rwanda, and of course what we knew is happening, which is that lawyers are challenging it, and they'll probably manage to overturn it in court. And it has turned political, and that's the point, isn't it? That when something turns political, it means that people will happily turn their way from it and turn their attention to trying to derail it for any reason that they can. Tim, if people want to find out more about the PHA Group, where do they go? It's thephagroup.com. phagroup.com. Tim Jachiski, Director of Reputation there. Thank you so much for joining us and going through the papers. It's much appreciated. Meanwhile, turning our attention to breakfast, Julia Hartley-Brewer is here. Good morning.
Very good morning. Yes, we'll be touching on that subject, the Rwanda flights. Of course, the whole point of the Rwanda flight policy is to have the lefty lawyers challenging it in court and get the front page of the Daily Mail and gee up support for this issue. This is exactly the sort of the point of this policy, isn't it? Do we think this is ever going to happen? I do wonder.
I wonder where their focus is, because, I mean, they've got a chance. Focus on what really matters to you, me, us.
I genuinely think if you can't decide who lives in this country, and you're not in charge of the country, I think it's just really very basic for a lot of us, isn't it? Going to be talking about the cost of living once again. Cost of petrol, £100 to fill up a family car now.
Unbelievable.
It's just unaffordable for most families now. It really is. What also is unaffordable for a lot of families is actually buying their own home. The government, though, Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, who's going to be on the show a little bit later, going to be talking about this new plan to allow people who are on housing benefit. They earn so little they're on housing benefit, having it topped up by you and me, to be allowed to buy their homes. If you're on a housing benefit, are you really in a position to buy your own home when there are millions of people who work full-time and who are not on benefits who also can't? The answer, of course, is building more homes, not these sort of policies. So we'll be talking about all of that. There's an awful lot to come.
There is certainly an awful lot to come, and I'm really sorry to report, Julia, but I'm somewhat demob happy.
You are. You and me both were terrible at this.
I know, we are.
Off on another hole.
Well, it's not another one. It's holiday. There's been a lot of hard work, so I won't see you for a little while. I think Christo's going to be here in my place. I'm